Hello, everybody. My name is Sam Morgan. I'm with So I Heard Music, and today we're going to be launching the first in a series of YouTube videos centered around music technology. And the first video series that I want to do is based on a software called GarageBand. This video is for anyone who has seen GarageBand on their computer, been curious about what it is, but never actually opened it or really known where to start with it. For the purposes of this video, I am assuming that if you're watching this, that you play an instrument or are involved in music in some way. I am not going to be spending a lot of time here talking about music theory or how to play your instrument. So if you don't play an instrument yet, GarageBand is not all that useful to you because it is a software that is meant to record music. And if you don't know how to play music, you're not going to know much about recording music. So if you do play an instrument, this video is for you, and I'm going to be showing you the very basics of GarageBand. GarageBand is a DAW software, which stands for Digital Audio Workstation, aka a recording software. And there are lots of different DAWs out there. GarageBand is among the most basic and easiest to use, so I want to start here. But keep in mind that a lot of things we're going to be talking about in today's video apply to pretty much any DAW that you can use. So after this video series, we're going to be doing series on all of the other softwares. The major ones are Logic Pro, Ableton Live, FL Studio, as well as Pro Tools. Those all tend to be slightly more professional versions of GarageBand. But GarageBand will teach you the basics, and it's important to start slow and easy. So we're going to dive right in. I'm going to open up GarageBand on my computer here. And when I open up GarageBand, one of the first things you're going to see is it's going to ask you to choose a track type. All DAW softwares use tracks to determine which instruments are playing at which times. A track is basically a place for one instrument to live. And there are two main different types of tracks that I want you to be aware of. They are a MIDI track, M-I-D-I, or an audio track. And there is a core difference between the two of them. And that difference is that MIDI is extremely editable after the fact, which means that when you record a MIDI instrument, if you happen to mess up a note in terms of pitch, maybe you didn't play that note long enough, maybe you played the note for too short a period of time, you can actually dive in and fix those things after the fact. It's really cool. An audio track, on the other hand, is mainly used for things like microphones when you're recording your vocals, or guitar and bass track when you're recording that into the computer. And with audio tracks, it's really important that when you record, you get as perfect a performance as possible, because we're not going to be able to edit the individual notes behind audio tracks. We're going to be seeing examples of both of these in action today, so I'm just going to dive right in and create my first software instrument track, which is a type of MIDI track. Before we get started, too, I just want to talk about the two main pieces of equipment that I highly recommend you get if you're going to be launching in and using GarageBand as a serious endeavor. And those two pieces of equipment are a MIDI keyboard. You can see here I have an M-Audio KeyStation 49. It's one of the most basics, and I'll put the link in the description to this video. A MIDI keyboard hooks up to your computer, usually via USB, and it allows you to input notes from the keyboard into the computer for MIDI tracks. The other piece of equipment that you're going to want is an audio interface. That allows you to hook up a microphone or a guitar or bass to your computer, and it's really important for recording audio tracks. The audio interface that I would recommend is called a Focusrite 2i2. I'll put a link to that in the description as well. Those two pieces of gear are among the most entry-level and cheapest that you can buy just to get started. So let's dive in. We're going to create a software instrument track. And before we start recording, I want to talk about some of our project settings, which all live up here in the top half of your screen. This area of the screen is called the transport. And in the transport, you can see different controls like play, pause, fast forward, rewind, and record. You can also see your metronome controls over here. So this will turn on and off your metronome, as well as on and off a 4-beat count-in for when you record. We'll see those in action in a little bit. In this panel here, you have a bunch of information about your project. It's called the information panel. We can see which bar or measure we're on, as well as which beat within that bar. So at the beginning, I'm on measure 1, beat 1. If I move halfway through that measure, I'm in measure 1, beat 3, and so on. As you move through, it'll track where you are in the project. I also have access to my tempo controls. It defaults to 120, but I can click and drag up to make my project faster, or drag down to make it slower. I can also double click and just type in a tempo that works for me. Then I have my time signature settings. It defaults to 4/4, but you can change it to 3/4 or 6/8, or even add a custom time signature if you want to. And then you have the key of your project. For the purposes of today's project, I'm going to be staying in the key of C major. Over here you have your information panel display settings. So it defaults to beats and project, which is going to give you both the bar and beat count, as well as the tempo and the time signature and key signature like we just talked about. If we switch it to beats and time, it will display the minutes and seconds alongside the beat. So this is a good way of tracking how long your project is so far. And then we can display either just the beats or just the time. I tend to leave mine on beats and project because I like to see my tempo and time signature information while I work. Okay, so that's the transport controls up top. Let's dive in. We've created our first software instrument, and a software instrument is exactly what it sounds like. It's an instrument that is contained within the software, and we use our MIDI keyboard controller to control that sound. So the default software instrument, it's always going to create in GarageBand a classic electric piano. So if I play a couple chords, you'll hear that sound. Right? Over here to the left, we have our library panel. And in the library panel, we can choose different sounds for the track that we just created. So let's say I don't like the electric piano sound. I can change it to a regular Steinway grand piano. I can also do things like control guitars with my keyboard. Right? You even have electronic synthesizer type sounds. You have orchestral strings, organs, brass instruments, things like that. So I highly recommend messing around with your sound library, seeing everything that it has available and all the different sounds that you can create using MIDI tracks. For today's example, I'm just going to be using a standard piano sound. And we're going to go ahead and start recording. So for today's project, I'm going to use a very simple chord progression. I'm going to use 6-4-1-5, or in the key of C, A minor, F, C, and then G. Right? So once again, it's A minor, F, C, G. And so I'm going to go ahead, I'll give each of these chords 2 measures of time, and I'm going to go ahead and just record that. So to record, if I press either my red circle record button up here, I can also just press the R button on my keyboard, and that will record as well. Since I have both my metronome and my count in check, you'll see that when I press record, it's going to back up 4 beats, give me a 4-beat count in, and then I'm ready to go. So here we go. I'm going to press R on my keyboard and start recording. And you can see once I'm done recording, this green box appears, and in almost all DAWs, this green box is called a region. Regions contain little clips of music, and as we record, we create more regions in our project. So this region, because I recorded 8 measures, is 8 measures long. And let's dive in and talk about what I said when I said that MIDI is editable. So we're going to be looking at something called the piano roll view. And the piano roll view is going to display all of our different notes on the piano so that we know which notes they are and how long they last. So I can get to the piano roll view either by double-clicking on my green region or by pressing this little scissor button in the top left corner of GarageBand. So if I click that, you're going to see this panel opens down here. I can hover over the gray bar in the middle to increase the amount of space that takes up or lessen it. And right here, I can see all the notes that I just played, And if I click on one, it'll show me what note it is on piano. And then I see the bars and the beats up top. So I can see that this note A lasts for, whoops, almost 2 beats, right? Now it doesn't last exactly 2 beats because I am not a robot and I didn't play it perfectly. You can see over here, here's measure 9. Even the start of my chord isn't quite lined up with measure 9. So the first thing I want to teach you guys about is a feature in all DAWs called quantizing. And quantizing will take your MIDI performance and make it rhythmically perfect. In order to quantize, we're going to select all the notes in our piano roll view. The easiest way to do that is by going to Edit, Select All, or if you're a fan of shortcuts, Command A. So when I select all, it's going to highlight all of my notes. And then over here in the time quantize area, I want to select the fastest rhythm value that I played. In this case, I played some half notes. I held some notes for 2 beats. So I'm going to go ahead and select half note. And what you're going to notice is all of my notes are going to snap and lock to the nearest half note rhythm value. And that's going to sort of make it sound, again, rhythmically perfect. From here, I can also hover over the right side of any note and lengthen or shorten it. So if I wanted to create the effect of a sustain pedal, I might take all my notes and drag them over to the next note, right? You can also click on any note. Let's say that I played a wrong note, which I didn't in this example, but if I did, I can click a note and move it up or down to get new notes, right? So there's a lot that you can do in the piano roll view. You can even hold the command button on your keyboard and you'll notice that my cursor changes into a pencil. So let's say I wanted to add a root note above all these chords I played. I can just draw those in, right? Just as an example. So in this case, maybe I'll draw in the octaves below what I played so that I have these nice thick octaves in my left hand. And now when I listen back, you can see it sounds a lot thicker and cleaner. Okay, so that is our first recording. We recorded a MIDI track, we went into the piano roll view, and we edited some of the notes. And now from here, we can start adding new tracks and layering things into our arrangement. So let's say that I wanted to layer in something a little bit more electronic-y underneath that piano sound. I can go up to the track menu and create a new track, select software instrument again. I'll press create. And now I can choose a new instrument. You want to make sure that you don't choose a new instrument while you're selected on the one that you just recorded. If you do that, it will change the sound of that recording. So we created a new track, and now we can go in. I'll click on synthesizer, or maybe instead of a synthesizer, let's do some strings, some violins and cellos and things like that. So I'm going to go to orchestral. Let's go to strings, and we'll go to string ensemble. Now, instead of recording again, if I want to use the same chords and the same rhythm and the same style that I just played, I can simply copy and paste what I just recorded down to the string ensemble track. So you can do that by either selecting the region and pressing Edit, Copy, and then selecting the new track, lining up where you want to start it with this is called our playhead. And we can do Edit, Paste. The easier way to do that is I like to hold Option on my keyboard and click and drag down. You notice the little plus sign? That's going to create a copy of what we just did. So without much work, I've just created a new track, copied my information down, and now I have both piano and strings playing at the same time. Let's take a listen. Now, what I noticed right away is that my strings were a little bit louder than I'd like them to be. So over here on each track, you notice a bunch of different controls that I want to talk about now. The main slider here is our volume control. So if my strings are too loud, I can simply click and drag and lower the volume of those strings. And that's much better. I can also, for the purposes of listening, mute out a certain track. So if I want to mute my piano, And then the opposite of mute in DAWs is called solo. That's this little headphone button here. That will make sure that you can only hear that track. So if I wanted to solo the piano, it would kind of be the same thing as muting the strings. This little circular dial over to the right is called pan. And pan is difficult to hear if you're not wearing headphones or if you're watching this video on either your phone or just through laptop speakers. But what pan does is it determines, does the sound appear directly in the center, or does it appear only in our left speaker or left headphone, or only in our right headphone? This can be cool if you want to separate things and give them a little bit more width in your recording. So let's say I want to put my piano all the way in the left headphone and my strings all the way in the right. Again, this is going to be difficult to hear if you're not wearing headphones or don't have a good quality set of speakers, but this is what it would sound like if you do. You can hear my strings are all the way over to the right and my piano is all the way over to the left. If you hold the Option button on your keyboard and click the dial, you will return those to center. That is a neat little trick that's very helpful, because otherwise you have to kind of dial it in and make sure that you land on 0 somehow. Awesome. So we've created 2 MIDI tracks. We can go into and edit our strings if we want and add more sounds. All of your copy and paste features work the same way, so I can do that Option drag trick within the piano roll. Let's see, I wanted to add an octave above this layer. I can highlight all the notes I want, hold Option, and click and drag up to the next A to make a copy, and now I'll have a thicker sound up there, right? So let's dive in. Now that we've learned a little bit about MIDI tracks, let's dive in and record our first audio track. So I'm going to add a guitar to this song, and I will be back in just a second once I get my guitar set up. Okay, and I'm back. I have my guitar here. I have my guitar plugged in to my audio interface like we talked about. And I'm going to go ahead and go to the track menu and create a new track. And I'm going to select the guitar or bass option. Now, when you're recording audio, it's important to know what input your microphone or guitar is plugged into. If you have the Focusrite 2i2 like I suggested, you're only going to have 2 inputs. I'm using an audio interface that has a lot more than that right now, which is why you see all of these different options. But I have my guitar plugged into the second input of my interface. So I'm going to go ahead and click Input 2. I have guitar or bass selected, and I'm going to press Create. Now when you do that, you're going to notice over here that you have all the different guitar sounds that you can choose from. So I'm going to go ahead and just select Amazing Tweed. You can mess around with the different sounds. You'll notice if I play my guitar right now, I don't hear anything in my speakers. That's because I'm not set up for what we call input monitoring, which is this little button that looks like a radio broadcast over here. When I click that button, it'll let me hear the sound that I selected. So now as you go through, you can mess with the different types of sounds. Right? So I'm going to select this Amazing Tweed. I'm also going to lower the volume of my guitar a little bit. And now I'm going to go ahead and we're going to press record. And I'm going to record my first audio track so we can see what that looks like. I'm going to just play the same chords on guitar that I played on piano before. Here we go. Okay, and so we've recorded our guitar part in there, and you can see it looks a little bit different than our MIDI tracks. So for guitar, we get a waveform, this is called. It shows us the actual audio signal of what we just played. Like I said, this is not nearly as editable as what we just did with MIDI. So with audio, I have basic controls like I can shorten or lengthen, the sound that I just recorded, but I can't dive in and actually see the individual notes. You'll see if I click that piano roll button from before on an audio track, it's just going to show me a bigger version of my waveform. So what you play is what you get. You want to make sure that you record enough times until you get a near perfect sounding take. One thing that is cool about audio tracks like this is you can change the sound after the fact. So if I want to audition different types of sounds, I might solo my guitar, and then I can set a loop. This is the loop button up here, and that's going to create this little yellow highlighted area, and I can lengthen that if I want to hear the whole thing. And all that's going to do is when I get to the end, it's going to loop back to the beginning. So now that this is playing, I can change the sound of my guitar and audition different sounds. So let's see what some of these sound like. Get the idea. You can see it looped back to the beginning, so I can keep trying different things. I actually really like this Dynatrem sound, so maybe we'll leave it on that. That's a pretty cool sound. And then if I unsolo, I can all of a sudden hear it in context with everything else. So that's our first audio track. We recorded a guitar. Let's add another audio track. I'm going to go ahead and pick up my bass guitar, and we're going to add in a bass part to this as well. Okay, and I'm back, and I have my bass guitar plugged in. I have it plugged into the same input on my audio interface that my guitar was plugged into, so we can follow pretty much the exact same path. I can go to track, new track, guitar or bass. I'm set to input 2, and I'm going to go ahead and press create. And this time we're going to head over to the bass section of our sound selection screen in our library. And I'll just choose a bass sound. Let's try this 60s combo. And then if I press my input monitoring button, I can hear what that sounds like. Which sounds pretty cool to me. So we're going to go ahead and stick with that and record that sound. So if I move my playhead to the start of my project, and I press record, I'm going to hear my 4-beat count in, and I'll be able to record my bass. There you have it. There is our bass guitar track. Okay, so now that we have 2 MIDI tracks and 2 audio tracks, our project is just missing one thing, which is the drums. And in GarageBand, there are 3 different ways to do drums. I'm going to be talking about 2 of them in this video. The third one deserves its own video. So the 2 I'm going to be talking about are the drummer track, which some of you may have seen in the track selection window, as well as the loop browser, which we're going to get into in a little bit. Let's start with the drummer track. So if I go to track, new track, over here on the right, there's a special type of track called the drummer. This is a recent feature in GarageBand. I think it's really cool, especially for us non-drummers. It is the quickest and easiest way to get an awesome sounding drum beat into your song. I use this a lot for the purposes of demoing and hearing what my ideas sound like with drums. So when we create the drummer track, you're going to notice a couple things right away. First, it automatically creates a region for you that starts at the beginning of the project on measure 1. You can see I started my recording on measure 7, so we're going to have to move that. And that region that it creates is 8 measures long, which is the exact length of what we did too. So if I just click and move this over to line up with my project, you'll hear the drums right underneath everything else. If I don't touch anything else in my settings, this is what it sounds like right out of the box. it sounds pretty cool. I'm a rock guy, so I love that sound. But let's talk about some of the adjustments that you can make to what's happening. Down here, you see this main little yellow circle area with a bunch of different descriptions. Up top, we have loud. To the right, we have complex. Down here, we have soft and simple. So depending on where you position this little yellow circle, it's going to create a combination or a different beat that sort of has those characteristics. So if I put something all the way up to the top right, it's going to be rather loud and rather complex. Take a listen. If I position it to the lower left, it's going to be rather simple and rather soft. I actually kind of like where it was, which was on the loud side and slightly to the simple side here. Then over here you can select which types of drums you want included in that beat. So let's say instead of the hi-hat, I want some toms. Or maybe I want my crash and ride cymbals. I can also add tambourine or maraca. I can choose how many fills I want in there and also if the drums swing or not. One of the coolest features of the drummer track, in my opinion too, is this ability to follow other tracks that you have. So most commonly we want to follow our bass track, which is called the 60s combo. So if I select that, you'll notice that my kick drum is going to sync up with the waveforms of my bass. This is really, really cool. Check it out. And that really tightens things up for us. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time of this, but keep in mind this sounds like a rock drum beat because we're selected on a rock drummer named Kyle. There are all sorts of different types of drummers, and they all have their own flair. So if you go to R&B, you'll get a more R&B sound. You have electronic drummers. You have hip-hop drummers. So mess around with the different types of drummers on the drummer track, and you'll be able to dial in a drum beat that works for you and your project. Let's talk about the other type of drums, which is using Apple loops. And so I'm going to go ahead and just right-click and delete this drummer track as though we never created it. So now we still don't have drums in our song. If I click up here in the top right, this little roller coaster button, it is our loop browser. And Apple loops are really cool. They are pre-recorded bits of music that you can drag into your project to add. I don't use them for much other than drums, but there are guitar loops and string loops and brass loops and different types of stuff. But if you click on Instrument and select All Drums, you'll see only the drum loops. Now, you can see down here there are 5,606 different types of drum loops, so we do not have time to listen to even a fraction of them today. But spend some time going through the different types of loops. You can also refine them by genre. So if I want, say, just rock drums, now I have 1,000 items, right? So you can narrow them down. So if I'm looking at just the rock loops, or since we did a rock beat before, maybe this time instead of rock, we will do hip-hop drums. So let's make this more of a sort of rap sound. So in my browser now, I can listen and audition the different types of drum beats. So maybe I'll check out this full moon beat. Or how about the freeway? Right, so if you click on the different loops, you can hear what they sound like. I actually really like that full moon. So let's say that we like that one. If we just click and drag it into our project and line it up, we will have drums automatically added to our track. So you guys get the idea. That's going to wrap it up for this video today. There's a lot of stuff that we haven't talked about, a lot of different features in GarageBand that I didn't address today. One of those is the Smart Controls window down here, which you can see for the MIDI tracks has certain features, for the guitar tracks has certain features. We're going to do separate videos on all of those, but I wanted to get through the basics today. So today what we've learned about is our transport and basic project settings, the difference between MIDI and audio tracks, as well as adding drums to our project. I hope you guys learned something awesome today. GarageBand is an amazing software that allows you to open up your musical possibilities as a musician. But for me personally, I use it as a teacher. And if you're a teacher out there, this makes your lessons a lot more fun and exciting for your students. So please continue watching these videos. I'm going to be teaching you guys all sorts of stuff about how to incorporate this into lessons if you're a teacher, how to inspire and motivate your students. That's the use that I get most out of GarageBand. We'll also be doing other video series on the more advanced DAWs for you hobby musicians out there, as well as you professionals who want to learn how to record and how to make your recordings sound amazing. Like I said, GarageBand is a very entry-level program and doesn't do a lot of the things that some of the more advanced softwares do. So I hope you guys learned some of the basics today. If you have any questions, leave a comment down below. Make sure you like this video. Make sure you subscribe to our channel because we have a lot more content coming your way. Again, I'm Sam Morgan. I'm with So I Heard Music, and this is our first YouTube series on GarageBand. We'll see you guys next time.